Okay, I know it's early, so I'm not going to talk very long, but I would not be me if I did not address certain things because some of what is taking place is foul. And I'm specifically addressing the older women in the space, like the 40-plus-year-olds, because the way that you gaslight these young girls is not going to fly with those of us who are old enough to know better. So I'm going to play a song because I want us to understand the seriousness of the issue concerning Black femicide. And then I'm going to talk about the ways that there are women who have entered into this space and who have taken advantage of the fact that we are concerned about this issue. So give me about 3 minutes to play the song. Happy Saturday morning. I'm gonna try to keep it toned down, but I'm very upset by some of the things that I heard on Clubhouse last night. All right, but we're gonna play this very quickly. She loves to look at all the pretty lights. Homegirl with them brown eyes. Skinny jeans looking skin tight. Says she looking for a plain guy. Mama don't care and her daddy gone. Bought all the clothes all on her own. Dark chocolate is a skin tone. They only love her with the lights on. Cause she's a real one. Big heart, sweet girl. Oh, she's a pretty girl. Definition of a southern belle. Looking for her. She's a real one. Big heart, sweet girl. Life got up to the black girl. Sad day for black girl. Here's what she said, baby. Hold on, don't let go. You wanna see how it feels to be a black girl. Hold on, don't let go. You wanna see how it feels just to be a black girl. Oh, death of a black girl. Hey, she loves her loving that she gets from guys. Don't love her to stay by her side. It's heartbreaking when you think twice. She's so fine, she make you think twice. Love to replicate what they don't know. Make millions from originals. Homeboys said they won't stay. Leave her hanging for a fake one. But she's a real one. Big heart, sweet girl. Oh, she's a pretty girl. Definition of a southern belle. Looking for her. She's a real one. Big heart, sweet girl. Life got up to the black girl. Sad day for black girl. Here's what she said, baby. Hold on, don't let go. You wanna see how it feels to be a black girl. Hold on, don't let go. You wanna see how it feels just of a black girl. Hold on, don't let go. You wanna see how it feels to be a black girl. Hold on, don't let go. You wanna see how it feels just of a black girl. Hey, just of a black girl. Hey, death of a black. Okay, that song is called Death of a Black Girl. Because, we're all over social media talking about the murders and abuse of Black women. So this whole situation surrounding what they are now calling the Black Women's March, right, is very disturbing. And I'm going to tell you why. Some of you are not on Clubhouse, right? And you probably shouldn't be, if this kind of stuff is traumatizing to you. But you have like 18 to 25-year-old young Black women who were on Clubhouse promoting what was originally the Femicide March. And those girls were very open about the things that they've experienced, whether it was abuse that they went through or other Black women. And those young women's pain was used to raise money for this march. And anytime you had other women, whether they were younger Black women or middle-aged Black women, who asked questions, you had Black women, one bitch is pushing 40, so she's old enough to know better. Then you had other Black women in their 40s and 50s looking at these young Black women and calling them nappy-headed hoes, bitches, calling them all out of their names simply because they are critical thinkers and they're asking questions. And see, the reason that some of these women got pushed aside when they tried to market themselves to other races of women is because other races of women will ask you questions, and if you act funny about it, they will report you to the applicable state or federal agency. But with Black women, we're bitches and nappy-headed hoes for simply asking you, well, okay, there's a march, where's the permit? You're saying that you received threats. Who did the threats come from? Do you all understand that communicating online threats is pretty much a crime in every state, and in some cases, it's a federal crime? So if you're planning an event and people threaten you, all you got to do is file a police report. So if you're saying that you were threatened, why didn't you file a police report? Why did you not go to law enforcement? If you're saying that you were threatened, why you got cameras and camera phones all up in these women's faces as you're having them give their names and tell you what part of the country they're from? Why are we demonized for simply saying, okay, you're asking us to support your cause, but where's the money going? And I keep saying this, if a person has a nonprofit organization and they're asking you to support a cause, it's a red flag if they don't ask you to donate directly to their organization. And I'm not just saying that just out of nowhere, okay? I have a very close acquaintance who actually has a nonprofit organization. And when people try to donate money to her, she tells them how to give money to her organization for two reasons. A, you can get a report of how the organization is using their money, and that's public information. But also, when you donate directly to a nonprofit organization, they give you a statement that you can then, if you have an accountant or a tax preparer, you can give that to your tax preparer so that you get, you can deduct it when you do your taxes. I don't think you can deduct funds that you give to a GoFundMe for tax purposes. But when we asked those questions, it was, oh, divesters are trying to ruin the march. Well, no. And it's also a major red flag that some of the people who were promoting the march opted not to go. Some of the people who were promoting it on Clubhouse, on Twitter, and YouTube decided not to go. Why is that? Is it because they realized that something wasn't on the up and up about this event? And I keep telling y'all, there are women who enter into this space simply to scam. Now, asking people to support you on Patreon, to send you super chats and Cash App, that's not scamming, right? That's people just asking you to donate to them for the time that they are putting into their content. But if people say, I'm having this event and I'm raising money for said event and I need X amount of dollars, you have the right to say, well, okay, sis, I don't mind supporting you. I just want an idea of what you're going to do with my hard-earned money. As people were pointing out on Clubhouse, COVID hit some Black women very hard. You have a lot of Black women who were without jobs, who were without housing, or if you know, they did continue to work, they're working long hours. Maybe you've got additional expenses related to childcare. You're helping out family members who maybe have struggled through COVID. So asking women who have been through all of that for a donation is kind of You know, it's kind of like, okay, you're asking people for money at a time where some people have gone through a lot of shit. And whether a person gives you $1 or $100, they have the right to ask you what you're going to do with the money. They have the right to say, well, hey, you're saying we're having a march, but there's no permit. Where's the permit for the route? The permit for the sound? You do realize that in some areas, if you're going to have a march and you're going to be playing music and or you're going to be having people chant and shout certain things, that's a separate permit. You know how easy it is to find out when a person filed a permit? If they filed a permit at all? You had women who booked flights and made hotel arrangements to come to that march, in addition to donating. So they have the right to say, well, okay, we showed up to this march and it doesn't look like you spent a fraction of the money that you raised on the actual event. And hey, I took off work. I paid for a plane ticket. I paid for hotel accommodations. I paid for food. You got girls on Clubhouse. And when I say girls, I don't mean to belittle you or demean you, but you got to understand, I'm fit to turn 41. So if you 18 or 19, you a baby to me, okay? But you have girls talking about how they donated using the money like their extra funds, their Starbucks money, the money they would use to get their nails and feet and hair done. And now listen, they on Instagram saying that they haven't heard from Rosa since a few days after the march. She had the march, got the money, and now she's not talking to some people who were her closest confidants. They haven't heard from her. She's still posting on her backup page. But then people have not heard from her at all. She's not responding to phone calls, text messages, or emails. And I just want to issue a word of caution. Anytime people have a problem with you asking questions, it's a major red flag. Especially because the way that people were asking the questions was not confrontational. It was not rude or anything. It was just, okay, you're having this march. What's the game plan? Sis, why are you telling us you need security when, like, the DC police would have done all of that? If threats have been communicated, have you filed a police report? Do you understand that there are people who reached out to old girl directly and offered to connect her to certain resources to help her get the word out about the march, and she declined? That months before Divesters pointed out there was no permit, you had other women in that girl's circle who offered to help her file the necessary permits, and she declined it. And when I call her a girl, I'm using that term very loosely. That girl, that lady is in her early, possibly mid 50s. And it's disgusting to me for a 50-something-year-old woman to be calling 18, 19, 20-something-year-old young Black women bitches and nappy-headed hoes simply because they have questions. We go around bragging about the fact that we're the most educated group of people in the country, right? Part of intelligence means being analytical, means being a critical thinker, means asking questions. That's a sign of intelligence. When you see little kids and they ask a lot of questions about things, that's a little child that is going to grow up and be a critical thinker. So when these girls were asking questions and you're yelling and screaming at them, I'm telling you, some of it is hateful. And frankly, it's borderline verbal abuse. Because they would sit on Clubhouse for hours. You nappy-headed hoes, you deserve to be abused. Oh, and the other thing they were saying is well, since you're questioning them about the march, if you become a victim of Black femicide, they're going to dance on your graves. That's what these women were saying. These middle-aged hags were verbally abusing younger Black women simply for asking questions. And I've seen some of y'all across social media calling myself and others mammies simply because we were pointing out, like, hey, something doesn't feel right about this. If you know anything about event planning and rallies and marches, they do have an itinerary. So you know, okay, where you're supposed to meet, what time the march is going to start, when people are going to be speaking. They do things like have bottled water out. Like, there are certain things that you have to do when you have events. You do it because if you're marching around and moving around, or you're having whatever sort of yoga class they had and somebody passes out or somebody feels faint, you do it to protect that person and their health, and frankly, you do it to protect yourself. None of that was done. But I've decided in the future that when I notice stuff like this, I'm not going to say anything, because I'm learning you all just have to see this for yourselves. But it was very disheartening to hear those girls on Clubhouse literally in tears because they realized they had been taken advantage of by older Black women. See, this is why there's a little bit of a thing between the younger Black girls and those of us who are middle-aged. They don't trust us, and frankly, I don't blame them. Because anytime they raise a concern or anytime they have questions, there are older Black women who are just evil. And it's like, well, this is why your sons are so fucked up. Look at you. And it's like, man, they trusted you. I didn't, because I know better. Okay. I know a scammer when I see one. I was raised in the church. Some of the most raggedy and unapologetic scammers are in Black churches. Okay. So I can spot a fraud pretty easily. All I'm going to say is be careful and don't let people make you feel bad for asking questions. And frankly, if people have nonprofit organizations, they should not have to use crowdfunding for fundraising. They'll simply just ask you to donate directly to their organization. And I'm going to tell y'all something else that hopefully you're paying attention to. Any of these women who were with old girl calling y'all bitches and nappy-headed hoes because you were asking questions, you need to view those women with suspicion. Or those women who were passive aggressive and saying, oh, well, you're asking questions because you're immature. View them bitches with suspicion. Because I really believe, and I can state my opinions, but I really believe that it's a couple people that took that money and split it. And that's why they're fighting so hard to make you feel bad for simply questioning things. For simply saying, well, okay, we see what y'all did, but that doesn't look like damn near $40,000 when you didn't even have water for them people. It's summer in DC, hot as hell. You didn't even have bottled water for them. So just be careful, because there are people entering the BWE space because they know y'all will donate. And this is why I've been saying for the past few months that divesters and divestment-minded women, we need to separate ourselves from BWE. We can recognize the fact that there are going to be some similarities, but we need to draw a clear line, because all of the scamming and taking advantage of Black women and verbally abusing Black women is not coming from this side of the house. It's not divestors scamming y'all. It's not us putting you in situations where you are publicly trauma bonding and then using your pain to raise money. And I'm going to tell y'all one last thing. If you have experienced certain things, you don't need to be on social media telling people all your business. Not all of it. It's okay to say you've experienced XYZ or whatever, but you need real counseling and real therapy. None of these people that you are pouring your hearts out to have the necessary credentials to counsel you. They're not a therapist. They're not a counselor. They're not a psychiatrist. They're not a psychologist. And it can reopen a wound for you to share your pain with someone who is simply using you. it's causing you to relive those moments where maybe you were mentally, emotionally, or physically abused. But those of you who are middle-aged and y'all are doing that shit to them young girls, y'all are sick. A lot of y'all don't want to admit it, but by the time you hit 40, if you look at an 18, 19, 20-year-old, that is someone who is young enough to be your child. Is that how y'all talk to your kids? Is that why we got to deal with all you fucked up and raggedy ass young people out here doing all this dumb shit? Because they grow up around you toxic ass bitches talking to them crazy? But you got to think about it. Someone who calls you a nappy-headed hoe and a bitch and who tells you they will dance on your grave if something happens to you, that is not someone who can possibly care about the plight of Black women and girls and Black children overall. Since some of y'all get upset if we make a distinction with girls versus boys. Y'all got to be careful. It was absolutely right for you all to ask questions. There was nothing wrong with it. And all I'm going to tell y'all is you got to be careful, because it's getting to the point where those of us who care enough to warn you are emotionally exhausted, because every time stuff like this happens and we say, well, hey, you need to be careful, y'all dump on us. But then when you get upset, you want to use the very content creators that you shitted on to go after people that, frankly, you willingly donated to. And it's like you've got to be more careful. And I know it's a difficult thing to acknowledge, but there are Black women who will use you and take advantage of you just like anyone else. Because to hear them girls on Clubhouse crying and talking about all the stuff they've been through, and to see these women use their pain to raise money and then just run off with it, that's disgusting. And those of you who do that, and you are licensed in the medical field, you understand what you're potentially doing to yourself? Because my understanding is that if you're a nurse or whatever else in the medical field, you have to, when you hear about certain things, you're required to report it, first of all. But secondly, it could be an ethical issue for you to have done what you did with this march. So I'm going to get to the rest of my Saturday, but you got to be careful. And the other reason I feel like these moments are a reminder that we need to operate as our own sector is because when stuff like this happens, where it's an obvious scam, it makes the whole space look bad. When you have people under the umbrella of BWE calling young Black women, the same ones you claim to care about, calling them nappy-headed hoes, bitches, and telling them that you're going to dance on their graves, it makes the whole space look bad. Because what people do is they take that radical, toxic, and extreme shit that y'all say, and they apply it to everyone around you. And it's very disturbing because OG BWE would never do that. They would never stand for it. They would never, ever say, well, if something happens to you, you deserve it, and I'm going to dance on your grave. Like, bitch, are you serious? All because these girls are asking valid questions? And let me tell y'all something. Words are spells. All y'all claim to practice witchcraft or whatever. Words are spells. You got to be very careful talking about dancing on someone else's grave. Saying shit like that could put you in a situation where you're the one that's 6 feet under. Reopening wounds, the wounds of young women who have obviously been emotionally traumatized, reopening those wounds for your financial gain. You're setting yourselves up spiritually. Anyway, y'all have a good Saturday. I know that a lot of us in the space are very concerned and frankly very hurt by the fact that Black women were used to line a raggedy ass bitch's pockets. But don't let it get you down. If you donated, you did so in good faith. You were well intended. And so you have nothing to feel bad about. All I hope is that we all use this as a reminder in the future and to always view it as a red flag when people have problems with you asking questions, because it's like, bitch, you asking me for my money. You're asking me for my money. I don't care if I give you a penny or $1,000. I have the right to say, well, okay, what's the game plan? And what are you going to do with this money? You have the right to do that. And no other group of women would be demonized for asking those questions. And that y'all call divesters radical, toxic, and extreme. No, bitch, that's you. The fact that there's nothing in you that feels bad when you hear them girls on Clubhouse, like literally crying because they feel like you took advantage of them and you don't feel anything for it, bitch, you have no soul. You have no soul. To look at anybody, right, and say that you hope they die and you would dance on their graves, that's fucked up. But for your whole, for the foundation of your message to be about caring about Black women and Black girls, and then for you to look at other Black women and say, well, if something happens to you, I'm gonna dance on your grave because you won't donate to me, you have no soul. And I hope y'all know that apparently old girl is trying to move to Canada with $30,000 or $40,000, and that's how I know you know nothing about life. You're trying to go to Toronto, Ontario, Montreal with $40,000, bitch. Do you know how expensive it is to live there? But I'm gonna let you see that on your own. Y'all be careful, because I'm telling you, a lot of this shit is just a money grab. All right.